When the nurse adjusted my fore and smirked, I thought it was just a joke, but the way her fingers lingered on my wrist, the way her eyes held mine a little too long, I realized this wasn't just about medicine anymore. I woke to the soft hiss of an fore drip and the faint, clean smell of antiseptic. For a moment I didn't know where I was. The ceiling above me was pale and too perfect, the sheets tucked in tighter than anything I'd ever manage at home. My arm felt heavy, tethered by clear tubing. Then I saw her. She stood at the side of my bed, checking the monitor with an ease that made me think she'd done it 1,000 times. Her hair was pulled back, but a few loose strands brushed against her cheek, catching the glow of the overhead light. She wasn't young like the nursing students I'd seen on TV dramas. No, there was something grounded about her. Like she'd seen more nights like this than she could count, but still hadn't lost the patience to show up for each one. "You're awake," she said, her voice warm but steady, like she'd been expecting me to open my eyes. I tried to answer, but my throat was dry. She poured water from the pitcher into a plastic cup and held it out, her fingers brushing mine when I took it. Her hand was warm, steady, almost too steady for someone who had just met me. "Careful," she said, one corner of her mouth curving upward. "You've been out for a while. Let's take it slow." I sipped, grateful for the coolness in my mouth, and set the cup down. She adjusted the fore line with practiced precision, then glanced at me with a small, knowing smirk. "This one's going to make you feel better," she said. "Might even leave you begging for more." It was said lightly, a teasing edge to it, but something about the way her eyes held mine for a second longer made my chest tighten. She didn't look away right away, and neither did I. For a brief moment, the room felt too quiet, just the steady beep of the monitor, and the sound of my own breathing. She broke the moment first, giving the line a final check before stepping back. "Pain should ease up soon," she said, softer now. "Try to get some rest. I'll be back in a bit." I watched her walk toward the door, her movements unhurried, graceful in a way that didn't feel intentional. When the door clicked shut behind her, the room suddenly felt too big, too empty. I lay back against the pillow, staring at the ceiling again. I told myself it was just the medication, just the strangeness of being here, but my thoughts kept circling back to her smirk, her voice, the warmth of her fingers against my skin. And for the first time since I'd woken, I didn't feel quite so afraid. I must have drifted in and out of sleep, because the next time I opened my eyes, the hallway lights were dimmed, and the world outside my window was pitch black. The room hummed softly, the low whir of a distant machine, the occasional click of footsteps on the polished floor. And there she was again. She moved quietly, checking the monitors like a shadow that belonged in this place. When she noticed I was awake, her expression softened into something almost like relief. "Still with us?" she asked, voice low so it wouldn't disturb the quiet. "Yeah," I said, my voice rasping a little. "Guess I'm not much of a sleeper tonight." She smiled, not the polite kind you give strangers, but a smaller, tired one that felt real. She pulled up the rolling stool and sat near the side of the bed, her elbows resting on her knees. "Night shift does that to people," she said. "Everything feels slower. You start thinking too much." I nodded, staring at the faint outline of the four-pole against the wall. "What do you think about?" She tilted her head, considering. "Coffee, mostly. Sometimes about what I'd be doing if I wasn't here." There was a pause, comfortable, somehow. The kind where silence doesn't feel heavy, just present. "What would you be doing?" I asked, and for some reason it felt important to know. She let out a soft laugh, shaking her head a little. "Sleeping. Or reading. Probably both." Then she glanced at me, and for a second, it felt like we weren't in a hospital at all, just two people having a quiet conversation at the end of a long night. Her hair had started to slip loose, a few strands brushing against her cheek. I wanted to say something, maybe that she looked tired, or that she deserved that sleep she was talking about, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I asked about her favorite book, and she told me, describing it with a light in her voice that hadn't been there before. The way she spoke made me forget about the beeping machines and the ache in my side. When she handed me another cup of water, her fingers brushed mine again. It was a small thing, barely there, but it felt deliberate this time, or maybe I just wanted it to be. She stood after a while, checking the clock on the wall. "Try to get some rest before morning," she said gently. "You'll need it." I watched her leave again, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the room. When the door closed, I realized I was smiling, and I couldn't explain why. Night blurred into night in that quiet room, but this one felt different. The pain was sharper, a low throb that made it hard to stay still. I pressed the call button, and before long, I heard her familiar footsteps in the hallway, steady, calm, the kind of sound you didn't know you could be grateful for until you were alone at 2 a.m. She entered quietly, carrying that soft glow with her, and adjusted the door with practiced care. When her eyes met mine, she didn't just glance, she stayed there, reading me like she already knew what I was about to say. "Rough night?" she asked. I hesitated before nodding. "Yeah. Pain's worse, but that's not all of it." She pulled up the stool again, sat beside me, and for a while she just waited, not pushing, not filling the space with unnecessary words. "You can tell me," she said gently, her voice the kind of quiet that feels safe. I took a breath, staring at the faint glow of the monitor. "It's not just the pain. I keep thinking about what happens when I leave here. What if I can't get back to normal? What if this sets me back in a way I can't fix?" The words came out faster than I expected, like I'd been holding them back too long. She didn't interrupt. She just reached over and rested her hand lightly on my forearm, her thumb brushing once against the inside of my wrist. "You're allowed to be scared," she said after a moment. "Everyone pretends they're not, but fear's just your brain saying you've got something to lose." Her hand stayed there, warm and steady. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I noticed the faint lines near her eyes, the kind that come from years of holding it together for other people. "What about you?" I asked quietly. "Are you ever scared?" She let out a slow breath, her gaze dropping to her lap for a second before returning to mine. "More than I'd like to admit," she said. "But I've learned it's not about getting rid of fear. It's about walking with it until it stops feeling so heavy." The room was so quiet I could hear the distant hum of the air conditioner. Her hand was still on my arm, her touch grounding me in a way painkillers never could. For a moment neither of us moved. I wasn't sure if it was the medication or something else entirely, but the space between us felt smaller, charged, like a string pulled taut and waiting to snap. She gave my arm one last gentle squeeze before standing. "Try to rest," she said softly, almost like a promise. When she left, the room felt different. Not empty this time, just full of everything unsaid. The next night, the room was quiet except for the occasional hallway sounds, a cart rolling past, muffled voices of staff at the nurse's station. I was half asleep when I heard the door open softly. But this time, she wasn't in her usual brisk, professional rhythm. No gloves, no clipboard, no quick check of the monitor first. She just stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her, as though she didn't want the rest of the hospital to notice. "I'm on my break," she said, almost apologetically. "Thought I'd check on you anyway." She didn't sit on the stool this time. She perched on the edge of the windowsill, one knee bent, arms loosely folded. The faint glow from the city lights spilled in, outlining her in soft gold. For the first time, I realized how tired she must be, not just tonight, but all the nights before this one. "Long shift?" I asked. She let out a breath, a half laugh. "They're all long shifts. But tonight's not bad. You're an easy patient." I smiled at that, even though I knew she probably said it to everyone. "You sound like someone who could use a vacation." She tilted her head, as if imagining it. "If I took one, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. This job, it keeps me steady." Something about the way she said it made me want to know more. "Steady," I repeated. "Like a routine?" "Like a shield," she corrected softly. "People see the uniform and they forget you're a person. You're just a nurse, not someone who gets tired or has bad days." She turned her face toward the window, as if the city lights were easier to look at than me. The moment stretched, quiet but intimate. "What about outside of here?" I asked. "Do you get to just be yourself?" Her lips curved in a wry smile. "Sometimes. Not as often as I'd like." There was something unguarded about her in that moment, not the calm, perfectly composed professional who adjusted my fore on the first night, but a woman who'd built a life out of taking care of other people, maybe at the cost of taking care of herself. I wanted to say something that would make her feel seen the way she'd made me feel seen last night. Instead, I just said softly, "You deserve more of those moments." Her eyes met mine then, searching my face like she was trying to decide if I meant it. Then she smiled, small, tired, but real. "Maybe I do," she said quietly. She stayed a few minutes longer, sitting there in the dim light, before finally standing. When she left, the room felt warm in a way it hadn't before, as though she'd left a piece of herself behind. It was late again, the kind of late that makes every sound in the hospital seem louder. I had woken with a sharp twinge of pain in my side, the kind that made even breathing feel heavy. I pressed the call button almost absent-mindedly, not really expecting her to come so quickly. But she was there within minutes. Her presence was immediate, calm, familiar, the soft click of her shoes on the polished floor, the steady weight of her hands as she adjusted the fore. I wanted to tell her I was fine, that it wasn't that bad, but the words didn't come. "You're a tough one," she murmured, checking the flow of the fluid. "But even tough ones deserve a little care." Her fingers brushed the inside of my wrist as she adjusted the line. The touch was light, professional, and yet electric. A warmth ran up my arm, a flutter that had nothing to do with the medicine running through the drip. She moved closer, repositioning my pillow. I didn't think anything of it at first, just comfort, just care. But when she smoothed back a stray lock of hair from my forehead, her fingers lingered a fraction too long. I felt the heat of her hand against my temple, the softness of her touch, and something inside me shifted. She glanced down at me, catching my eyes just as mine were drawn to hers. There was a pause, a quiet, charged silence. Neither of us said anything, but I felt the tension, a taut thread between us. It wasn't impatience or fear, just the weight of something unspoken. I wanted to reach for her hand to hold it, but I hesitated, afraid of crossing a line. She must have felt the hesitation because her fingers finally withdrew, slowly, deliberately, leaving a trace of warmth that made the air feel too heavy to breathe. "You'll be okay," she said softly, voice almost a whisper now. "Just rest for a bit." I nodded, but my chest was still tight. Her presence lingered even as she stepped back, even as she adjusted the blanket around me and finally returned to her usual professional stance. The faint scent of her perfume hung in the air, and I found myself staring at the spot where she had been. It was the first time I realized that what I was feeling wasn't just gratitude. It wasn't just the comfort of care. There was something more, something unspoken, dangerous in its subtlety, but compelling nonetheless. When she left, I lay back against the pillow, heart still racing, and replayed every moment of her touch in my mind. The way her fingers had lingered, the soft warmth of her hand, the way her eyes had held mine for one breath too long. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I knew I would never forget it. Morning light filtered softly through the blinds, casting stripes across the hospital room. Today was the day I would be discharged, leaving behind the steady rhythm of monitors, the quiet hum of machines, and, most of all, her. I tried to focus on packing my things, but my hands kept lingering on the items she had touched, the neatly folded blanket, the water cup she had poured just yesterday, even the small notebook I'd kept tucked under my pillow. Everything seemed to carry the weight of her presence. She appeared at the door during her morning round, her uniform crisp and professional as always. But for a moment she paused, and I noticed a faint hesitation in her stance. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she watched me, as if trying to memorize the way I looked, the small movements I made, the way I seemed a little less broken than when I arrived. "You ready to go?" she asked softly, though her voice carried the weight of something unspoken. "I think so," I replied, forcing a casual tone that didn't reach my chest. She came closer, checking the paperwork with her usual precision, but when she leaned over, her hand brushed mine again, lighter this time, almost like a question. Our fingers lingered together for a beat, and I felt a pulse of warmth run through me, the same quiet electricity from before. "You've done well," she said, eyes meeting mine with that careful balance of professionalism and something more intimate. "And thank you?" I didn't know what to say. "For what?" I asked, though my voice cracked slightly. "For letting me be part of this," she murmured, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "For reminding me why I keep showing up." We stood there for a moment, the room suspended in silence. I wanted to close the distance, to reach for her again, but fear held me back, fear of breaking the fragile, perfect tension that existed between us. Finally, she stepped back. "I'll see you outside?" she asked, almost softly enough that it could have been a question to herself. When I reached the lobby, she was already there. She handed me a small slip of paper, folded neatly. I opened it carefully. On it was the name of a cafe, written in her delicate, precise handwriting. I looked up, and she met my gaze, eyes bright, lips curved in that small, knowing smile that had first made my heart skip a beat. Then she turned, walking away slowly, leaving me standing in the morning sunlight, feeling both empty and exhilarated at once. I held the slip of paper in my hand, the weight of possibility pressing against my chest. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew one thing: this wasn't an ending. Not really. It was the beginning of something I hadn't expected, a slow, quiet connection that promised more than either of us could yet imagine. The city outside felt different that morning. Fresh, almost electric, as if it knew I was leaving the quiet safety of the hospital room behind. I stepped out, the weight of the bag gone, the crisp air brushing against my skin, and for a moment, I paused, letting the sunlight fill me. Then I saw her. She was waiting near the hospital entrance, leaning casually against the wall, her arms crossed loosely, the faintest curve of a smile on her lips. She didn't rush to meet me, but her presence made the air feel warmer, more alive. "Hey," I said, my voice catching slightly. "Hey," she replied, soft and steady, like she had all the time in the world. I noticed how the morning light caught the strands of her hair, the gentle tilt of her head, the quiet confidence she carried effortlessly. I felt the familiar pull in my chest, that mixture of admiration and nervousness that had been growing with every interaction. She reached into her pocket and handed me a small, folded slip of paper. I opened it carefully, my fingers trembling a little. It was the cafe she had mentioned before, her handwriting neat and deliberate. "Thought you might like a place to start again," she said, her voice gentle but with a hint of teasing, the same way it had been the first night she adjusted my fore. I looked up, our eyes meeting. The world around us seemed to blur slightly, the morning traffic fading into the background. I wanted to say something clever, something that would capture all the gratitude and warmth I felt, but no words came. Instead, I smiled, a real, unguarded smile, and folded the paper carefully, tucking it into my pocket. She stepped a little closer, the subtle scent of her perfume brushing against me, just enough to make my chest tighten. "I'll see you there?" she asked quietly. I nodded, feeling the steady thrum of hope beneath my ribs. "I'll be there." We lingered for a moment, neither of us moving, just absorbing the simple, fragile intensity of the connection that had grown over quiet nights, small touches, and unspoken confessions. It wasn't a grand declaration. It wasn't dramatic or urgent. It was the quiet certainty that we would find our way to each other again. Then she turned, walking toward the street with a fluid grace that made my heart lurch in the best way possible. I watched her go, holding the slip of paper like a promise. A beginning. I stepped forward into the sunlight, letting it wash over me, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. And I realized that sometimes the most profound connections start quietly, in the brush of a hand, a shared glance, a soft smile across a hospital room. As I walked toward the cafe she had suggested, anticipation and calm mingled inside me. This was the start of something real, something carefully nurtured and slow burning. and for the first time in a long while, I felt ready for it. The story didn't end with a dramatic gesture or a sudden confession. It ended with possibility, warm, patient, and quietly beautiful.